The rain fell in heavy sheets across the abandoned mining colony of Zarian 7, turning the red dust into muddy rivers that flowed between the skeletal remains of prefab buildings. Captain Marcus Chen pulled his jacket tighter against the cold as he picked his way through the debris field that had once been a thriving extraction operation. His ship, the merchant vessel Wanderer, sat on the landing pad like a metal island in the storm, its hull gleaming wet under the gray sky. Marcus had come to Zarian 7 following reports of salvageable equipment left behind when the colony was hastily evacuated 3 months ago. The hegemony had pulled out fast when the mineral veins ran dry, leaving behind everything they couldn't fit in their transport ships. For an independent trader like Marcus, such abandoned sites were gold mines of spare parts and recyclable materials. He paused at what had been the colony's main administrative building, its roof partially collapsed from a recent meteor shower. The automatic doors hung open like a broken mouth, revealing darkness within. Marcus checked his scanner. Still no signs of life, just as the orbital sweeps had indicated. The colonists had taken everyone when they left. Almost everyone. A faint sound reached his ears over the drumming rain, something that made him freeze mid-step. It was soft, rhythmic, almost like breathing, but with a strange whistling quality. Marcus drew his sidearm not because he expected trouble, but because 20 years of trading in the outer systems had taught him to be ready for anything. The sound came again, definitely from inside the ruined building. Marcus activated his helmet's light and stepped through the doorway. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing overturned furniture, scattered data pads, and walls streaked with water damage. He followed the sound deeper into the building, past empty offices and meeting rooms, until he reached what appeared to have been a medical facility. That's where he found her. The alien lay crumpled in the corner behind an overturned medical bed, her body curled into a defensive position. Marcus had seen many species during his travels, but this one was new to him. She was humanoid in basic structure, but clearly not human. Her skin had a pale blue-gray tint that seemed to shimmer even in the artificial light. Silver hair fell in tangled waves around her face, and her limbs appeared longer and more delicate than human proportions would suggest. What made Marcus catch his breath was her condition. Dark stains covered her clothing, and one of her legs was bent at an unnatural angle. Her breathing was shallow and labored, producing that whistling sound he had heard. She was alive, but barely. "Hey there," Marcus said softly, holstering his weapon and raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "I'm not going to hurt you." The alien's eyes snapped open, large silver orbs that seemed to reflect his helmet light like mirrors. She tried to scramble backward but cried out in pain, her injured leg preventing any real movement. Her eyes darted around frantically, searching for an escape route that didn't exist. "Easy, easy," Marcus continued in the same gentle tone he might use with a frightened animal. "I'm human. My name is Marcus. I'm not with the hegemony." At the word human, something changed in her expression. The panic didn't leave her eyes, but it was joined by something else. Confusion, maybe even hope. She spoke then, her voice weak but melodic, in a language Marcus didn't recognize. The words flowed together like water, with subtle harmonics that suggested her species had a more complex vocal structure than humans. Marcus activated his universal translator, though he knew it would take time to build a working database for a new language. For now, he had to rely on gestures and tone. He pointed to himself and said slowly, "Marcus, human." Then he pointed to her with a questioning expression. She seemed to understand the exchange. Her voice was barely above a whisper when she replied, but Marcus caught what sounded like Zara, and then a longer phrase that might have been her full name or title. "Zara," Marcus repeated, and she nodded slightly. "Okay, Zara, you're hurt. I need to help you, but I have to move you to my ship. My medical bay can treat your injuries." The translator was starting to pick up patterns in her speech, providing rough approximations of meaning. When Zara spoke again, the device offered, "Why? Help. Danger. Alone." Marcus knelt down slowly, making sure she could see every movement. "Because that's what humans do," he said. "We don't leave people to die alone, no matter who they are or where they come from." Zara's eyes searched his face as if trying to determine if he was telling the truth. Marcus had seen that look before in the eyes of refugees and survivors across the galaxy, the desperate need to trust warring with hard-learned caution. Whatever had happened to her, whoever had left her here, they had broken something fundamental in her ability to believe in help. "The others," the translator offered from her next words, "left, broken, worthless, burden." The pieces began falling into place for Marcus. The hegemony was known for their efficiency above all else. When they evacuated the colony, they had taken only what was useful, valuable, or necessary. An injured alien who couldn't walk would have been seen as dead weight, a burden that would slow down their departure. They had simply left her to die. The realization sent a cold anger through Marcus's chest. He had dealt with hegemony bureaucrats before and knew their callous calculations, but this was beyond even their usual cruelty. No one deserved to be abandoned like garbage when they were hurt and helpless. "Well, they were wrong," Marcus said firmly. "You're not worthless, and you're not a burden. Can you put your arms around my neck? I need to carry you to my ship." Zara hesitated for a long moment. Marcus could see the fear in her eyes, not just of him, but of hoping and being disappointed again. Finally, she gave a small nod and slowly lifted her arms. Marcus slipped one arm under her knees and the other behind her back, being careful of her injured leg. As he lifted her, Zara made a soft sound of pain but didn't resist. She was surprisingly light, her bones apparently less dense than human bones. Marcus noticed that her body temperature seemed lower than human normal, and her skin had a texture that was almost scale-like but incredibly smooth. "I've got you," Marcus said as he carried her toward the entrance. "My ship has a full medical suite. We'll get you patched up, fed, and safe." The journey back to the Wanderer was treacherous in the rain and mud, but Marcus moved carefully, constantly checking to make sure Zara was still conscious. She had gone very quiet, her head resting against his shoulder, but he could feel her breathing steadily. The ship's medical bay was one of the more sophisticated systems Marcus had invested in over the years. Trading in the outer systems meant encountering injuries and illnesses that standard human medicine might not be equipped to handle. So he had spared no expense in getting equipment that could adapt to different physiologies. Marcus placed Zara gently on the examination table and activated the medical scanner. The device hummed to life, running deep scans of her body while simultaneously analyzing her species' basic biology. Within minutes, it had identified multiple fractures in her leg, several cracked ribs, signs of dehydration and malnutrition, and what appeared to be an infection in one of her wounds. "The good news," Marcus said, interpreting the readouts, "is that none of this is fatal if we treat it properly. The bad news is that you've been suffering for a while. How long were you alone in that building?" Zara's response came through the translator as fragments. "Days, many days. Lost count, cold, hungry." Marcus felt his anger at the hegemony flare again. Days. She had been lying injured and alone for days, probably thinking she was going to die in that dark, cold room. No one should have to endure that kind of abandonment. "Well, that's over now," Marcus said as he began preparing medical supplies. "The scanner says you're from a species called Solani. Apparently there's a small entry in the medical database about your people. Your bone structure is more flexible than human bones, which is why your leg isn't completely shattered, but it still needs to be set and treated." The medical bay's systems went to work with quiet efficiency. Automated surgical arms positioned Zara's leg correctly, while the bone regenerator began encouraging the fractures to heal. An IV line delivered nutrients and antibiotics tailored to her specific physiology. Marcus monitored everything carefully, making adjustments as needed. Throughout the process, Zara watched him with those large silver eyes. Marcus could see her trying to understand why this strange human was helping her, why he wasn't demanding payment or asking what she could do for him in return. "Where will you go?" Marcus asked when the immediate medical procedures were complete. "Do you have family somewhere? A home world?" Zara's expression grew sad, and the translator picked up her quiet response. "Home, destroyed, war, family gone, was traveling, seeking work, mining colony was temporary, had nowhere else." The picture became even clearer and more heartbreaking. Zara was a refugee, probably one of millions displaced by the ongoing conflicts in the outer systems. She had taken whatever work she could find, even dangerous mining labor, because she had no other options. When the colony shut down, she had been injured and left behind like broken equipment. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, and he meant it. "I know what it's like to lose everything and have to start over." It was true. Marcus had once been a hegemony naval officer, but he had walked away after witnessing too many injustices, too many situations where regulations mattered more than lives. He had used his savings to buy the Wanderer and had spent the last 15 years trading independently, helping people when he could, and trying to make a positive difference in a galaxy that often seemed determined to crush the weak. "What happens now?" Zara asked, her words coming through more clearly as the translator built its database. Marcus considered the question. He could drop her off at the next station, give her some credits, and wish her luck. It would be the safe, practical thing to do. But looking at her lying there, still weak and vulnerable, still clearly expecting to be abandoned again, Marcus found himself making a different choice. "That depends," he said. "I run cargo and trade goods across about 40 different systems. It's not glamorous work, but it pays well, and I could use help with maintenance, navigation, maybe translation services for dealing with non-human clients. The pay would be fair, and you'd have a safe place to stay while you figure out what you want to do next." Zara stared at him in shock. "You offer job? But I am broken, worthless." They said, "They were wrong about a lot of things," Marcus interrupted firmly. "You're not broken, and you're definitely not worthless. Everyone deserves a chance to prove what they can do. Everyone deserves to be valued for who they are, not just what they can produce." Tears began flowing down Zara's face, though they were more silver than clear, catching the light like liquid metal. Marcus realized this might be the first genuine kindness she had experienced in a very long time. "Why?" she whispered. "Why help stranger? Why risk trouble?" Marcus smiled, thinking of his own journey from naval officer to independent trader, all the people who had helped him along the way when they didn't have to. "Because that's what humans do at our best. We help. We don't leave people behind. We believe everyone has value, even when they can't see it themselves." As Zara drifted off to sleep under the influence of the medical bay's sedatives, Marcus began plotting a course to his next trading destination. He had a feeling this was going to change everything about his solitary life among the stars, but for the first time in years, that change felt like something to look forward to rather than something to fear. Outside the medical bay's viewport, the storm over Xerion 7 was beginning to clear, revealing patches of star-filled sky. Marcus watched the light play across Zara's peaceful face and made himself a promise. No matter what came next, she would never be abandoned again. 3 weeks into their journey together, Marcus discovered that Zara possessed a mind that could navigate stellar cartography like others read simple maps. She sat in the co-pilot's chair, her injured leg now healed enough to walk with only a slight limp. studying the complex three-dimensional star charts with an intensity that amazed him. "The trade route you plan to Kepler Station?" Zara said, her command of Standard growing stronger each day. "It passes through the Veil Nebula, yes? That adds 6 days to the journey because of the gravitational distortions." Marcus looked up from his cargo manifest. "That's the established shipping lane. All the major carriers use it because it's the safest route." Zara manipulated the holographic display with delicate finger movements, her silver eyes reflecting the dancing lights of star systems and trade routes. "But here," she traced a path through what appeared to be empty space. "This corridor between the neutron stars. If we adjust our departure by 4 hours to account for their rotation cycle, we can ride the gravitational slingshot effect. It would cut our travel time to 8 days instead of 12. Marcus studied her proposed route with growing amazement. The mathematics were elegant, taking advantage of natural phenomena that most navigators would consider obstacles. "That's brilliant. How do you know about gravitational dynamics at this level?" A shadow passed across Zara's face. "Before the war destroyed my homeworld, I studied stellar mechanics at the Solani Science Institute. I was working toward my advanced certification in deep space navigation when—" She gestured vaguely, encompassing all the loss and displacement that had brought her to that abandoned mining colony. "The hegemony really doesn't know what they threw away," Marcus said softly. Their first test of Zara's abilities came when they encountered a hegemony patrol near the Rigel system. The 3 military vessels appeared on their sensors like hunting predators, their advanced ships easily capable of overtaking the Wanderer. Marcus felt his stomach tighten as the familiar arrogance crackled through their communications. "Merchant vessel, this is Commander Reeves of the Hegemony Third Fleet. Prepare for inspection. We have reports of unauthorized aliens in this sector." Marcus glanced at Zara, who had gone very still in her seat. He could see the fear in her eyes, the remembered trauma of being abandoned and left to die. Without hesitation, Marcus reached over and activated the ship's internal partitions, sealing off the entire aft section where Zara could hide safely. "Go," he said quietly. "I'll handle this." But Zara shook her head. "No. Running and hiding. I am tired of being afraid. They cast me aside once. I will not give them power over me again." Marcus wanted to argue, but he could see the determination in her silver eyes. This wasn't reckless bravado. It was someone choosing courage over fear, dignity over safety. He nodded and opened a channel to the hegemony ships. "Commander Reeves, this is Captain Chen of the merchant vessel Wanderer. I'm transmitting my trading license and cargo manifest. I've got a shipment of medical supplies bound for the Kepler Station emergency relief effort." The hegemony commander's voice carried barely concealed disdain. "Stand by for boarding, Chen. We're conducting random inspections for security purposes." 20 minutes later, Commander Reeves materialized on the Wanderer's bridge via transporter, flanked by 2 armed Marines. He was exactly what Marcus had expected, a middle-aged human with the kind of rigid posture that came from years of unquestioned authority. His eyes immediately fixed on Zara. "What do we have here?" Reeves asked, his voice sharp with suspicion. "Solani, aren't you? What's your registration status?" Zara stood slowly, her chin raised, despite the obvious fear in her eyes. "I am Zara Velthara, formerly of the Solani Science Institute. I am currently employed as a navigation specialist aboard this vessel." Reeves studied her with the cold calculation Marcus had seen in too many hegemony officers. "Employment records? Work permits?" "The Silani were classified as a refugee population after their little civil war. Most of them aren't authorized for independent travel." "Her documentation is in order," Marcus interjected, though they both knew it wasn't true. Zara had no papers, no official status, nothing but the clothes Marcus had given her and the job he had offered. "I'll be the judge of that," Reeves said. He activated a handheld scanner and directed it at Zara. Biometric readings don't match any registered Solani workers. In fact, these readings suggest she was flagged as non-essential personnel during the Zarian 7 evacuation. Marcus felt cold anger building in his chest. Non-essential? She's a trained stellar navigator with advanced degrees in space mechanics. Reeves laughed, a sound without any warmth. A refugee with questionable skills hardly qualifies as essential. The evacuation protocols were clear. Only productive, verified personnel were transported. The rest were left to find their own way. Left to die, you mean? Zara said quietly. Left to face reality, Reeves corrected coldly. The galaxy doesn't owe anyone a living. Those who can't contribute get left behind. It's simple efficiency. Marcus stepped between Reeves and Zara, his hand moving instinctively toward his sidearm. She's under my protection now. She's crew on my ship, and her skills have already proven invaluable. Skills, Reeves scoffed. What could a damaged refugee possibly offer that a competent human couldn't do better? That was when Zara spoke up, her voice steady despite the fear Marcus knew she was feeling. Commander, your patrol route through this sector. You're using the standard military corridors, correct? Following the established safe zones? Reeves frowned at the unexpected question. Of course. Military protocols exist for good reasons. Your fuel consumption must be significant, Zara continued. 3 heavy cruisers burning fusion engines through gravitational dead zones, fighting against solar winds and magnetic interference. How many days does a patrol circuit take? 18 days, one of Reeves's Marines answered, before the commander could stop him. Been the same route for 5 years. Zara moved to the navigation console, her fingers dancing across the holographic display. May I show you something, Commander? Before Reeves could object, she had highlighted their current position and begun tracing alternative routes through the system. If you adjust your patrol pattern by approximately 15 degrees, you can use the binary star system's gravitational field to your advantage. Instead of fighting against the natural forces, you work with them. The display showed elegant curves threading between stellar phenomena, using gravitational assists and stellar wind patterns to reduce travel time and fuel consumption. Where the standard patrol route took 18 days, Zara's optimization reduced it to 12 days, with nearly 40% less fuel usage. Reeves stared at the display in stunned silence. Marcus could see the calculations running behind his eyes. The cost savings, the efficiency gains, the strategic advantages of faster patrol coverage. This is advanced stellar mechanics, Reeves said slowly. Where did you learn this? Before my world was destroyed, Zara said simply. Before I became non-essential personnel, worth abandoning. The commander looked between Zara and the navigation display, clearly struggling with the cognitive dissonance. His worldview demanded that refugees be worthless, that the hegemony's classification system be correct. But the evidence of Zara's abilities was right in front of him, undeniable and impressive. The Solani Institute, one of the Marines said suddenly. Sir, I remember reading about them. Before the war, they were considered one of the premier centers for stellar navigation research in this sector. Their graduates served on ships throughout the galaxy. Reeves's jaw tightened. Marcus could see him trying to reconcile this information with his preconceptions. That may be, but current regulations clearly state, Current regulations, Marcus interrupted, are wrong, and deep down, you know it. How many other brilliant minds have been thrown away because some bureaucrat decided they weren't essential? How many innovations have been lost because people like Zara were treated as disposable? For a long moment, the bridge was silent, except for the quiet hum of the ship's systems. Reeves stared at the navigation display, at the elegant solution to a problem his fleet had been struggling with for months. Marcus could see the internal battle playing out across the commander's face. Finally, Reeves turned to his Marines. Power down weapons and return to the ship. This vessel and its crew are cleared for departure. As the hegemony officers prepared to leave, Reeves paused at the transporter platform. He looked back at Zara with something that might have been regret, or perhaps just confusion. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "the evacuation protocols weren't my decision. I follow orders." "And I understand that," Zara replied. "But following orders doesn't make those orders right. Sometimes the most important thing we can do is recognize when the system is wrong and choose to do better." After the hegemony ships departed, Marcus and Zara stood together on the bridge, watching the military vessels disappear into the distance. The immediate danger was over, but Marcus knew this encounter had changed something fundamental in their relationship. "Thank you," Zara said softly, "for standing between me and them, for being willing to risk trouble for my sake." "Thank you for not hiding," Marcus replied, "for showing them exactly what they threw away. That took real courage." Zara was quiet for a moment, her silver eyes reflecting the stars visible through the viewport. "I spent so many nights on Zerion 7 thinking I truly was worthless, that maybe they were right to leave me behind. But watching you, seeing how you treated me like a person instead of a burden, it reminded me who I used to be, who I could be again." Marcus smiled, thinking about the navigation optimization she had created, the brilliance she had displayed under pressure. "I don't think you ever stopped being that person. You just needed someone to see it." As they resumed course toward Kepler Station, using Zara's improved navigation route, Marcus reflected on how much had changed in just a few weeks. He had thought he was simply rescuing an injured alien from abandonment and death. Instead, he had discovered someone whose skills complemented his own perfectly, whose presence had already begun transforming not just his ship's operations, but his entire perspective on what it meant to travel the stars. The galaxy was full of refugees, displaced people, and individuals written off by systems that valued efficiency over humanity. Marcus was beginning to wonder how many other brilliant minds were out there, abandoned and forgotten, waiting for someone to see their true worth. He glanced over at Zara, who was absorbed in plotting their next route with obvious joy and expertise. Perhaps this was just the beginning of something much larger than either of them had imagined. 6 months later, the Wanderer had become something Marcus had never imagined it could be, a beacon of hope in the dark spaces between stars. The cargo bay that once held only trade goods now served as temporary shelter for refugees, displaced families, and individuals fleeing conflicts across the outer systems. What had started as one human helping one injured alien had grown into something approaching a small humanitarian fleet. Zara stood at the bridge's main console, coordinating the movements of 12 ships that had joined their growing convoy. Each vessel carried families, skilled workers, scientists, and artists who had been written off by various galactic governments as non-essential, burdensome, or simply inconvenient. Together, they formed a community that traveled the trade routes, offering services, skills, and hope to anyone willing to look beyond species, origin, or circumstances. The Andorian freighter, Lucky Strike, is requesting permission to join the convoy, Zara reported, her standard now flawless though she retained the melodic accent of her people. Their captain says they have 43 Taurian refugees rescued from a failed colony attempt in the Veil Nebula. Marcus smiled as he reviewed the request on his personal display. "Approved. Have them take position in Formation 7, and send them our newcomer packet, medical protocols, resource-sharing agreements, and work rotation schedules." The transformation had begun gradually. After their encounter with Commander Reeves, word had spread through the merchant networks about a human trader who didn't abandon his crew, who valued people over profit. Ships had begun seeking them out, some offering cargo contracts, others asking for help with problems the established authorities wouldn't address. The first had been the Zalani trader Keth Morvain, whose ship had been damaged by pirates near the Rigel system. Standard shipping companies would have written off his cargo of rare medicines as a total loss, but Marcus had helped repair his engines while Zara calculated a fast route to his destination that saved the temperature-sensitive shipment. In gratitude, Keth had remained with the convoy, his vessel's advanced sensors serving as early warning for the growing fleet. Then came Dr. Vyasa Redtail, an exiled Zephyrian scientist whose research into sustainable hydroponics had been deemed unprofitable by corporate sponsors. The food-growing systems she designed for the convoy had allowed them to become almost completely self-sufficient. Her innovations were now being shared freely among refugee settlements across 3 systems. Captain Sarah Chen, a former hegemony officer who had resigned in protest over their treatment of civilian populations, arrived with a modified patrol ship and 30 rescued families from a station the military had abandoned during a border dispute. Her tactical expertise and the convoy's growing reputation for helping the helpless had begun attracting attention from resistance movements fighting various forms of oppression. "Marcus," Zara said, interrupting his thoughts, "we're receiving a distress signal from the Kepler system. It's a hegemony frequency." Marcus frowned as he moved to the communications console. Hegemony ships didn't usually broadcast distress signals. Their pride rarely allowed them to admit they needed help, especially not from civilians. "This is Commander Victoria Reeves of the Hegemony Medical Transport, Mercy," the voice crackled through static. "We are experiencing critical system failures and have over 200 civilian patients aboard, including children. Our life support is failing and our engines are offline. We are requesting immediate assistance from any vessels in range." Marcus recognized the name. This was likely related to Commander Reeves from their earlier encounter, possibly a family member. But more importantly, there were children at risk. "Signal the convoy," Marcus ordered. "All ships with medical capabilities, prepare for emergency rescue operations. Zara, plot the fastest course to their position." "Marcus," Keth's voice came through the intership communication system. "This could be a trap. The hegemony doesn't usually ask for help from unauthorized vessels like us." "Maybe not," Marcus replied. "But if it's real, there are 200 innocent people who need help. That includes children. We don't abandon people in need, regardless of who they work for." Dr. Redtail's voice joined the conversation. "I'm reading the medical transport's distress data. The ship's biosigns indicate massive life support failures. This appears genuine." 23 minutes later, the convoy dropped out of hyperspace near the disabled hegemony vessel. The Mercy was listing badly, its hull showing signs of what appeared to be an explosion in the engineering section. Emergency lights flickered along its hull, and Marcus could see escape pods drifting nearby, a sign that some crew had already abandoned ship. "Commander Reeves," Marcus opened a channel to the stricken vessel. "This is Captain Chen of the convoy vessel Wanderer. We're here to help. What's your status?" The response came through heavy interference. "Captain Chen? Thank you for responding. We have complete power failure in the medical bay. Our patients are on emergency life support that has maybe 2 hours of power remaining. We've lost main engines and most of our crew to an engineering accident." Marcus looked around the bridge at his mixed-species crew. Zara was already coordinating with the other ships. Dr. Redtail was preparing emergency medical facilities, and Captain Chen was positioning the armed escort vessels to provide security during the rescue operation. "Commander, we're going to dock with your ship and begin emergency evacuation of your patients. Do you have any objection to treatment by non-human medical personnel?" There was a long pause before the response came. "Captain, I recognize your voice. We met before, 6 months ago, during an inspection. I remember your Solani navigator." "Yes, Commander. And I remember you classified her as non-essential personnel." Another pause. "Captain, If my patients die because of my prejudices, I'll never forgive myself. Please, just save them. Species doesn't matter anymore. The next 4 hours were a masterclass in coordinated humanitarian action. Dr. Amir Redtail's medical teams worked alongside hegemony doctors to stabilize the most critical patients. Zara's navigational expertise guided the rescue shuttles through the debris field around the damaged ship. Keth's sensors tracked every piece of floating wreckage to prevent collisions during the evacuation. Marcus found himself working alongside Commander Victoria Reeves in the Mercy's failing medical bay, helping to move patients onto evacuation stretchers. She was younger than he had expected, probably in her early 30s, with the kind of focused intensity that came from command responsibilities. "I've never seen coordination like this," she said as they carefully lifted a young human boy onto a transport gurney. "Your people work together like they've been training for this their entire lives." "They have been," Marcus replied. "Every day, in small ways. When you treat everyone as essential, when you value what people can contribute instead of writing them off, they become part of something bigger than themselves." As they carried the boy toward the evacuation shuttle, Commander Reeves spoke quietly. "My brother told me about your navigator, about what she showed him regarding patrol routes. We implemented her recommendations fleet-wide. They've saved thousands of hours and millions of credits in fuel costs." Marcus glanced at her in surprise. "I didn't know Commander Reeves was your brother." "He is, and he's been questioning everything since your encounter. The classification systems, the abandonment protocols, the whole philosophy of essential versus non-essential personnel." She paused at the shuttle entrance. "What you're doing out here, this convoy, helping people the system writes off. It's changing how some of us think about duty and service." The evacuation continued through the night cycle. When the last patient had been transferred to the convoy's medical facilities, Commander Reeves stood on the Wanderer's Bridge, looking out at the dozen ships that had responded to her distress call. Her own vessel had been completely abandoned, its hull too damaged to repair. "I don't understand," she said to Marcus and Zara. "Why did you risk everything to help us? We represent the same system that abandoned you, that classified you as worthless. We've never shown you any kindness." Zara stepped forward, her silver eyes reflecting the stars visible through the viewport. "Because that's what people do when they remember their humanity. They help, even when it's difficult. Even when the person they're helping has hurt them before." "Your patients needed help," Marcus added. "That's all that mattered. Everything else, politics, history, classification systems, becomes irrelevant when someone is dying." Commander Reeves was quiet for a long moment. "My crew and I are effectively stranded now. The hegemony won't send a rescue ship for a medical transport that was carrying low-priority civilian patients. We're no longer essential personnel ourselves." "Then you understand what it feels like," Zara said gently, "to be abandoned by the system you served faithfully." "I do?" Reeves looked around the bridge at the mixed group of humans and aliens working together seamlessly. "Captain Chen, I know this is presumptuous, but would you consider allowing my medical team to join your convoy? We have skills you could use, and we've learned something important about the difference between following orders and doing what's right." Marcus exchanged a look with Zara, who nodded slightly. "Welcome to the convoy, Commander. Though out here, we don't worry much about rank. We're all just people trying to help other people." 3 months later, the convoy had grown to nearly 50 ships. Commander Reeves, now simply called Victoria by her friends, had established medical outposts on 12 different worlds, providing free health care to refugee populations that government services ignored. Her brother had quietly begun feeding information about planned evacuations and abandonment operations to the convoy, allowing them to rescue people who would otherwise be left behind. Zara had been recognized by the Independent Traders Association as the most innovative stellar navigator in the outer systems. Her route optimization techniques were being taught at civilian flight academies, and her work on gravitational mechanics had earned her an honorary doctorate from the reformed Solani Science Institute. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the galaxy's various governments were beginning to view the convoy. What had started as a ragtag collection of refugees and outcasts had become a powerful humanitarian force that couldn't be ignored. Their success in helping people that official channels had written off was forcing policy reviews across multiple systems. Standing on the bridge of the Wanderer, watching the convoy's ships spread across space like a constellation of hope, Marcus reflected on the simple decision that had started it all. He had chosen to help one injured alien rather than leave her to die alone. That single act of human decency had created ripple effects that were changing lives across the galaxy. "Second thoughts?" Zara asked, joining him at the viewport. She had become not just his navigator, but his closest friend and most trusted advisor. "Never," Marcus replied. "Though I have to admit, when I found you in that abandoned medical bay, I never imagined we'd end up leading a movement." "We're not leading anything," Zara corrected with a smile. "We're just showing people what becomes possible when you refuse to abandon each other. The movement leads itself." A communication alert drew their attention to the main console. Dr. Redtail's voice carried excitement as she spoke. "Marcus." "Zara, you need to hear this. We just received a message from the Centauri Colonial Council. They're requesting a formal meeting to discuss establishing the convoy as an official humanitarian organization. They want to fund our operations and expand our rescue capabilities." Marcus looked at Zara, seeing his own amazement reflected in her silver eyes. Official recognition. "It gets better," Dr. Redtail continued. "3 other systems have made similar requests. The Vegan Alliance wants us to establish permanent refugee processing centers. The Independent Worlds Coalition is offering to provide ships and supplies. Even some hegemony commanders are privately supporting our work." As the implications sank in, Marcus felt a profound sense of completion. The galaxy was finally beginning to understand what he had known from the moment he lifted Zara from that dark medical bay. Everyone has value, everyone deserves help, and no one should be abandoned simply because they're inconvenient or different. "What do you think?" he asked Zara. "Ready to take this to the next level?" Zara's smile was radiant as she looked out at the ships carrying thousands of people who had once been written off as worthless. "I think the galaxy is ready to remember what we're capable of when we choose compassion over convenience, when we choose to see people instead of classifications. And when we remember," Marcus added, "that the measure of a civilization isn't how efficiently it abandons the vulnerable, but how creatively it finds ways to help them thrive." The convoy continued its journey through space, no longer just a collection of refugee ships, but a symbol of hope that was changing the galaxy one rescue at a time. Behind them, they left a trail of established medical stations, self-sufficient colonies, and communities of people who had learned to value each other not for what they could produce, but for who they were. And at the center of it all was a simple truth that Marcus had carried with him since that rainy day on Zarian 7. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to leave someone behind, even when everyone else says they're not worth saving. Especially then.